We're going to move right on to our next speaker, Sarah Tetlow. Sarah is the founder and CEO of Firm Focus, a legal productivity consulting firm. She's an experienced productivity consultant, trainer, and speaker for attorneys and other legal professionals. She uses her past experiences, organizational and strategic thought, education, and training to help law firms increase their bottom line and operate more efficiently. More importantly, attorneys see a reduction in stress and anxiety and an increase in focus in new business. Through one-on-one consulting, strategic planning, workshops, and group trainings, Sarah works with attorneys and law firms to find personalized ways in which to manage one's day with proactive and focused approach. Sarah enjoys work-life balance. I'm hoping you're going to tell us how that works. Engaging in a multitude of activities outside of Firm Focus. She's married to Andy, Director of Operations for a large restaurant group, and they have 2 sons. She enjoys outdoor activities with her family, dancing her heart away at UJam Fitness, learning self-improvement, and watching an occasional brainless series on Netflix during her quadrant for not important, not urgent time wasting period. In her presentation today, Hold My Purse, she will share her insights from the moments where she was moved to have someone else hold her purse in order so she could pursue something critical, and how you can and should be doing the same. So Sarah, we're so excited to hear your story today. The stage is yours.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody on the West Coast or in Hawaii. Susan, did you make it to Hawaii?
Aloha. I had to get up at 4:30 this morning to prepare for this, but it was so worth it. My neighbors in the condo are probably like, who is that crazy lady and who's she talking to at 4:30 in the morning? But yeah, and we will see you here soon, my friend.
I hope so. And then good afternoon to everybody on the East Coast and in between. It's wonderful to be here. And before I start, I am going to put a handout in the chat box if you want to grab that at your convenience. And if I could ask everyone for just a second, if you're willing to show your video, I just like to see the faces. So if you're willing to just turn that camera on for a moment, I'm just going to say hello. I'm getting some waves. It's wonderful to see you all, and I am thrilled to be here. Okay, let me pull up my slide here. And if there's any chat in the chat room that I need to pay attention to, if someone can just shout out to me, I'd appreciate it. Otherwise, I want to start with a question right now, which is, what is in your purse? If you were to go grab it, open it up right now, what would you find sitting inside that purse of yours? I've got some upside down Zoom comments, but that's probably not in response. Okay, we've got sanitizer is in our purse right now. A wallet, credit cards, lipstick. Okay, a lot of us are probably recognizing these contents. Receipts, Nerf stuff. I'm guessing boys as well. I've got sons. Tissues, masks, mints, everything, paper, snacks, lint. Okay, great. So these are some of the things that we are probably resonating with, what we would find in our purse today. But I want to propose a different perspective. What if our purse contained predictability? We take our purse, we hold it close, we safeguard it, but it is filled with predictability. Our purse has anxiety that we hold close to us. Our purse contains our safety. It contains our doubt, our fear, our pride, our imposter syndrome, as Rebecca just talked about. So today I'm going to tell you some stories about experiences in my life where I have asked somebody else to hold my purse so that I could do something great. I'd asked someone else to hold my negative emotions so I could step outside of my comfort zone and my safety and do something that I needed to do in that moment. So these are stories about courageous opportunities that I've experienced in my life and in my business that I want to share with you. And I'm going to challenge you to also think about those opportunities that you have had in your own life or business or career. So my story starts here today, Saturday, February 28th of 2004. I was an undergraduate student at the University of California, Santa Barbara, studying law and society. And at that time, my mom worked for Southwest Airlines, and I had been flying for free my whole life to this point. But those benefits were going to expire 2 weeks later when I turned 23. And so my mom and dad, Matt and Vicki Mulder, wanted to take me on one last free flight, one last weekend getaway to celebrate the end of my college years. I was graduating that year, and also the end of the benefits to fly for free. I'm going to pause and just see if you guys can check to make sure you're muted. I have a couple background noises coming in. You can see if you're muted. Thank you. So they wanted to take me on one last little getaway. But even at a young age, I had a keen awareness of time and project management. And finals were just around the corner, and I didn't feel comfortable flying anywhere for a whole weekend and getting away. And so we elected to just take a quick trip for the day into Las Vegas. While there, we had lunch, had a few cocktails, a mezcal, Susan. We did some gambling and played a few slot machines. And then ultimately, my dad had one final surprise in store before we headed back to the airport that evening to fly to our respective home airports, Los Angeles for me and Oakland for my parents. I had studied in Russia as an undergraduate student, and my dad had read about the Red Square Bar at Mandalay Bay. The Red Square Bar was a new hip place to go where the bar was made of ice, which kept your martinis cool and the conversations hot. And if you ordered bottle service, they would put big mink coats on you, put you in the freezer where you could sip your vodka, and you were greeted with Lenin's head in an ice cube. And so my dad wanted to invest in this experience as the last thing we did for the day. And when the bartender carded me, I was surprised to open my wallet and not have an ID. I had done activities all day long. Nobody had carded me. And at this moment, when I opened my wallet, it was empty. And that's because when we flew into Las Vegas, we left our bulky, distractible stuff with my mom's colleague at the airport. And I had stuck my ID in my book when I boarded the plane. So I literally started dumping the contents of my purse, the lipstick, the sanitizer, the masks, the paperwork, the pens, the wallet, out onto the ice, trying to find my ID, trying to find some form of identification so that we could enjoy the experience. And to no avail. The man standing next to me at the bar took this opportunity to lean in and say to me, "Who forgets their ID in Vegas?" At first, I didn't want to be bothered by him, but when it became evident that they were not going to serve me and they were not going to let me into the freezer, I talked to him. And 15 minutes later, after our short, brief conversation, my parents paid their bill and we left. We walked out of the Red Square Bar. We walked through the Mandalay Bay Casino, and we got almost out to the taxi curb when I stopped dead in my tracks. I turned to my mom and I literally uttered the words, "Hold my purse. Hold my purse." But what I was really asking my mom to do was hold my typical behavior, hold my predictability, hold what was distracting me and weighing me down in that moment. I passed my purse off to my mom and walked back to the Red Square Bar. So this kicks off my story of love. I walked into the Red Square Bar, went up to that man, tapped him on the shoulder, and handed him my business card. Yes, the 22-year-old me had a business card, Sarah Mulder, individual. If you move your camera, you might see that the word individual was actually on my business card. At that time, the 22-year-old me wanted to keep my opportunities open. I didn't have a true identity. I could be a pet sitter, a nanny, an administrative assistant, and maybe one day an entrepreneur. But in that moment, that business card was handed over to that man who called me that night and every day that year. Later, he moved to Santa Barbara, where I lived. 3.5 years later, He proposed to me in the freezer of the Red Square Bar. The experience I didn't get into the day we met, we got into 3.5 years later, and that is where he put a ring on my finger wearing that mink coat. We were married the following year in Santa Barbara, and both of our careers kicked off in the same historic building at De La Guerra Plaza in Santa Barbara. Andy worked for the Winecast Restaurant and Bar, and I worked for a small plaintiff's firm in Santa Barbara at De La Guerra Plaza. So I'm going to stop and pause for just a moment. I just told you my story of love, my story of taking that purse full of predictability and passing it off so I could do something brave and bold in that moment. So I challenge you to think about your own experiences. When have you taken your purse full of predictability and asked somebody else to hold it so that you could do something great? Write it down. My story doesn't end there today, though, because this is also a story of transformation. I mentioned that I worked for a small plaintiff's firm, and I started off as a receptionist when I kicked off my career in law. I then grew to a mid-sized firm as their legal assistant, and then ultimately I worked for a global firm in their Santa Barbara office doing paralegal work. At this point now was 2012. I had been at Sheppard Mullin for 5 years, but I started to feel a little bit stuck in my career and in our lives. We were having a hard time getting pregnant. I was recently diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder, and I felt like I needed to tap on that glass ceiling a little bit. And so Annie and I had a discussion, and ultimately we decided that I would take a position in San Francisco. So we moved to San Francisco in 2012. And for 6 years, I commuted an hour each way on BART, on the local subway system, to and from my work in San Francisco. And during that time on that train, I would hold my purse close, hold it and guard it on the train. But in 2018, I started to consider, what was I good at? What did I love to do? At this point, I now was the manager of the marketing and business development department. And I started to explore what I loved about that role, what I missed about being a paralegal, and where there was a need in the industry that I might be able to fill. And so while I held that purse tight, I took that purse full of anxiety and I passed it off. I passed it off on one train ride in particular. I came up with the idea of Firm Focus. Firm Focus to help lawyers and other busy professionals with time, attention, task, and project management and organization. But it was just a concept. It was just an idea. I did a lot of thinking and I landed on a name and the idea that I could help the industry, but there was just still so much more to do to make this come to fruition. So I'm going to pause again for a moment. That was my story of transformation. That was my story of taking a purse full of anxiety and asking somebody else to take that anxiety off my plate so I could do something bigger, different, make a change. How about you? You've certainly passed off some anxiety or changed that anxiety into excitement to do something great. Write it down. Remember that experience. And if it hasn't happened yet, as Holly said, visualize it, design it, and make it come true for yourself. That leads me into a story of risk. As I mentioned, it was a concept. It was an idea. It had a name. It was going to be Firm Focus, and I knew what I wanted to do. But I was comfortable. I had a routine. I had a career. I had benefits. I had a paycheck. And I wasn't exactly sure how to make this happen. And so I began to strategize. I began to strategize about what it would take to be able to give notice, walk away from my employer, and run this company and get clients and build it up. And so I set my intent for 6 months down the road, I would leave my job. And I started to put away a big portion of my paycheck so we would live off lesser means and I could build up a nest egg to run the company. And I also started to test out the theory that I had something that would help the lawyers down the hallway. And so under my just job description of business development manager, I was coaching the clients at my firm on business development and throwing in productivity tips or organizational tips. Soon there became a demand. People were coming to me in my office saying, I want to learn what you taught John down the hall. I gave a presentation at the firm, and then the founding shareholder asked me to do it again and make it mandatory. And then ultimately the day came. The day came 6 months later where I asked someone else to hold my safety. I packed up my box and I left my employer. Almost 2 years ago to the day was the day I left my full-time career and started Firm Focus officially with no clients. And of course, unsure if I had just made the right decision for me and my family. So that's my story of risk. That's my story of taking that safety and security and trusting that this bold move was the right bold move. So how about you? When have you taken your safety or your security with all of the fear and anxiety along with it and passed it on, asked somebody else to hold it so that you could do something unprecedented for yourself? And if you haven't done it, what does it look like? When will it happen? And set that intent today. So this is a story of courage as well. April 3rd of 2019 was one of the strangest days of my life. Instead of commuting to my job, I now had a guest room with a laptop and 1,017 ideas of what I needed to work on. I had content to build. I had a website to build. I had contracts to draft up. I had clients to get. I didn't have a client at all at this point. And I started to realize that it was a little too comfortable in my home. There were too many distractions, especially on that first day where I'm sitting in the guest room. There were corners that needed to be cleaned, laundry to be done, dishes to do. And I recognized that I needed a new environment to help get those creative juices flowing. And so I went to Andy and I asked him to hold my fear. What the hell is she up to now? It was his first reaction. And I explained to him that I wanted to go somewhere different to work on the business. I wanted to go to Mexico. I wanted to live in Mexico for a month and help me in being crystal clear on what I needed to do in the business. And for the first time in my entire career, I had a gift. Time. I had time that I could go live in Mexico for a month. And so this is a picture of my carpet where I literally mapped out what were the daily things I needed to do in the business, and then the high, medium, and lower priority projects to work on during that month. And so as long as I was willing to take my kids, the four of us boarded a plane for Mexico, where my husband got us settled into our apartment for 3 days, and then he went back to California to work. And 3 of us happy to go and 1 having an airport meltdown. We lived in Mexico for 31 days, where we immersed ourselves in the culture, where a language that I speak very little, yo hablo español un poquito, I had to challenge my thinking. We rode the bus, we had adventures, we went to the pool, and we also stayed in the apartment sometimes where I would make calls or work on what I needed to do in the business. But something magical happened in Mexico. In that 31 days, time felt so different. It felt slow. And every moment with my kids, every moment felt intentional, and every moment felt right, and really helped me design what I wanted to do in Firm Focus. So that was my story of courage, and it was courageous. It was an adventure I'm so proud that we did, and one I hope we can do again sometime in the future. So what about you? When have you taken a purse full of fear and done something that you needed to do to be courageous, to step out of your comfort zone or routine? And write that down if it hasn't happened, because if you write it down today, the accountability factor goes up. So this leads me to my next story, which is the story of support. I work with clients on time management. There are time management systems, strategies, variables. And I do that through trainings and workshops. I do it through coaching and through my ART email productivity system, because email has become such a time waster for most professionals. It's a distraction. It's a form of procrastination. It's an overwhelm and a huge pain point. And so I help teach clients to reframe their relationship to email, to make it a communication tool that it was intended to be, and not your to-do list or that pain point that drags you down throughout the day. And throughout my offerings and designing them through Firm Focus, I have had to take my purse full of pride and ask others to hold it for me. I've had to ask colleagues to hold it, mentors to hold it, my husband, my children, my family, my coach, even my clients at times, to take my purse full of pride and pass it off when I needed support the most. On the day-to-day that felt hard or challenging or confusing if I've done the right thing, I had to take that purse full of pride and get the support I needed in the moment. And I'm grateful that from that first business card of the 22-year-old me without an identity, all the way to the CEO of Firm Focus, that Andy has been my biggest cheerleader throughout that journey in my life. Who is your support system? Karen talked about support systems on Wednesday and making sure that they're diverse, making sure that you have a support system that will challenge you, also one that is your cheerleader, and one that might question you. What do they look like? Who are they? Are some more successful than you and others following in your footsteps? Write down your support system so that you know who to ask to hold your purse full of pride when you need a little bit of encouragement. That leads me into the story of today. This is the story of inspiration. I, on December 5th of 2019, sat in the audience of the Empowered Women Conference, and I watched these over a dozen women take the stage, talking about putting money in a slot machine while waiting for her parents, and then hitting a jackpot that helped her launch a career, launch a business that she only dreamed about up until this point. I watched another woman talk about a trauma, a tragedy that no mother should have to experience, and how that taught her how to feel, how to really feel from her gut. I learned from another woman who ordered bottles of wine as a holiday gift for her clients. And when they arrived, they had a slightly inappropriate insignia on the bottles of wine and chocolate. And she said, F it, I'm going to send them out anyway, which she did. She asked somebody else to hold her purse full of predictability and anxiety and fear and trepidation and went forward with it anyway. And it ended up being a great experience. And I watched another woman talk about a book that her mother-in-law recommended, a book of agreements that has helped pave her way. And I remember sitting in that audience that day thinking, one day I will join the women on that stage to tell my story, to tell a story. So today I ask you to hold my purse full of doubt as I join the other women at the Empowered Women 2021 conference. And I invite you to give me your purse full of doubt so that you can also join the stage next year. So I've told you stories of my life, of my opportunities to ask somebody else to hold my purse so that I wasn't distracted or weighed down or held back, so I could do something that was not a typical behavior of mine. I asked somebody else to hold my negative emotion so that I could grow. And I asked you to write down the times in your life that you've experienced, or the times that you can design in your mind right now to make them come true. Throughout my life, I have dumped the contents of my purse out in search of something. But what I was really dumping out were those negative connotations, the fear, the anxiety, the trepidation, the stress, the overwhelm, the doubt, the pride. And what I want to put back into our purse today are the positive attributions that we can carry around. So that takes me to one last story. The story of the future, the story of success. You see, I'm still a work in progress. I am still a baby company. I am still trying to grow. And while today I've given you examples of huge wins in my life, big milestones, behind those big wins and those big milestones have been the smaller wins that have kept me moving forward. Behind those wins and those big milestones have been the failures, the many failures, the no's, the you're too expensives, the doubts when I hang up with a client, did I really help her today? Did I really make an impact? Or the no responses, which keep you guessing. Do I need to check in with them again? Behind all of those big stories, as Rebecca just explained in great detail, there is still that imposter syndrome. And so I am going to ask all of you to help me hold my imposter syndrome, and I'm going to invite you to pass your imposter syndrome on as well. So today we're going to take that purse filled with lipstick and lip gloss and our wallets and our IDs and our phones, and we're going to fill it with something else. We're going to fill it with confidence. Today we're going to take that purse and we're going to put strength into it, positivity. Take your purse, open it up, and put belief, bravery. Put that courage in there, inspiration, and ultimately success. And then take that purse full of all of those positive attributes and give it to someone you trust to hold so that you can shatter glass. Thank you.